two things come to mind when it comes to changing the name. Is one, I think it makes the merger easier on the employees and on the two companies, particularly at like a higher level. Talking about like, at the CEO level, at the COO level, makes it a lot easier that, you don't have this kind of competition between this company versus that company. Like now we're one company, and you can kind of see that through the FCA CEO stepping down and their CEO becoming, the CEO of this merged company. And then on the other hand, I think there's power in a name, right? If I am FCA or if I'm Stellantis, or rather, if I'm another company coming to negotiate with Stellantis for like parts or material or something like that, there's a lot more power behind saying that, like, hey, like we're Stellantis and we're not just like, I'm not just FCA anymore. I'm now double, the capacity, double the capability, double the, revenue that I was before.
What is up, everyone? This is Ahmed Cheema here, live with Abdul Mannan and the one and only Ammar Alqouqa. Ammar is joining us for a special mini episode of the Branding Deep Dive podcast. It's another one of those rough cuts where we don't edit anything. It's just strictly a quick conversation because we were inspired. And what inspired this conversation is Ammar actually texted me when he found out that Fiat Chrysler was changing their name to Stellantis. So Ammar, you're the expert in this scenario here. Why don't you walk us through? First off, let's talk about, can you give us a brief introduction to who you are, what you do, that kind of thing, and then let's get right into it and talk about Fiat Chrysler and the change in name to Stellantis.
Yeah, so I used to be a youth director a couple years back. I had a great experience with that, and I learned a lot about, marketing and branding and kind of building a name for yourself. And then I moved on from that, and I became a web developer. Started working at the company I'm currently at. I've been working there for the past 2.5 years, and that's where I am. But with this new name change, it's actually not. The news came out kind of recent. It was kind of like solidified recently, but it's not a very new thing. So back in, just to give you guys some history, back in 2019, FCA like loves to do mergers. They used to do Chrysler, they merged with Fiat, and now they're Fiat Chrysler Automotive. They like anytime, like oh shoot, like our stocks are down, like merge with the company. But it's worked for them, and it saved them a lot of money, and it's expanded them like to like a huge vehicle population. So back in 2019, they were trying to merge with this French company, and the name escapes me. But the French government actually was not down for it whatsoever. They didn't allow it because it would have made them like too big. So instead of merging with them, they reached out to this other company named PSA Group, which is I believe also French.
Pakistani Student Association, right?
yeah, that's where, yeah. So they did this merger, and they spent a long time doing the merger and whatever, and then like mid or kind of late last year, late 2020, they finally unveiled their new name. So both companies are merging into this one new company, and even like the FCA CEO, Mike Manley, is no longer the CEO anymore, and the PSA, which is kind of, I don't know how they discussed this, by the way. If I was Mike Manley, I'd be salty, but the PSA CEO is now the hyper CEO of both companies, or now it's Stellantis. So they unveiled this new name, and like here they are. I think the main reason why they created this new name is not really from a branding perspective, but more of like a logistical thing. Because the name is not. Go ahead.
What do you mean by that?
The name is not being used. The name is an internal name, really. Like when they talk about it, they say this is a corporate brand, meaning they're not really using this. It's not really like client side. It's not facing the client. It's not being marketed at their, people buying their cars. It's purely a corporate thing. But even with that, I was kind of surprised because there's so much infrastructure you have to change just by changing a name, right? Like their headquarters, they have to change everything everywhere that says FCA. They have to change it to Stellantis, all their emails, like everything, which is just like a logistical nightmare. But they ended up doing it.
So the question I have based on what you just said is like, you got to change your emails, you got to change all the graphics you have, all the buildings, why would you go through the pain of doing that? Like, even if it's just internal, like, why not just kind of, hey, we're still whatever, you know what I mean? Like, what would inspire a company? And let's bring it back to, like, let's say we have a merger. Let's say we got two cookie companies here, and they want to do a merger. Why, like, under what circumstances do they consider changing their name? Because that is, like you're saying, it's a big commitment. You know what I mean? Even if they, so in the cookie example, if we take that analogy, we're saying Cookie Company A, Ahmed Cheema Cookies, is staying Cookie Company A. We're merging with Abdul Mannan Cookies, but for all our customers, we're still Ahmed Cheema Cookies and Abdul Mannan Cookies. But internally, we're saying we are Superpower Cookies, right? Like that's essentially what. Because all your nameplates are staying the same. Chrysler staying the same. The ones internationally, what was it, like Puget, or I don't know how to say it, but like all the brands they have are actually staying the same. Jeep, whatever. Yeah. It's just like you're saying, internally they're changing the name. So what do you think? Why do you think they would do that, and what inspires that kind of change?
Well, I think one thing that's important to remember is that like money drives everything, right? With these kinds of mergers and these kind of internal changes, money is 100% the driver. And FCA is actually saving, I think I saw it was $5.9 billion through this merger. So they're saving a lot of money. And I think two things come to mind when it comes to changing the name is one, I think it makes the merger easier on the employees and on the two companies, particularly at like a higher level. Talking about like, at the CEO level, at the COO level, makes it a lot easier that, you don't have this kind of competition between this company versus that company. Like now we're one company, and you can kind of see that through the FCA CEO stepping down and their CEO becoming, the CEO of this merged company. And then on the other hand, I think there's power in a name, right? If I am FCA or if I'm Stellantis, or rather, if I'm another company coming to negotiate with Stellantis for like parts or material or something like that, there's a lot more power behind saying that like, hey, like we're Stellantis and we're not just like, I'm not just FCA anymore. I'm now double, the capacity, double the capability, double the, revenue that I was before. And so I think making that change kind of sends a statement to all of their like internal suppliers, that they talk to. And I think it also, like, you can kind of see that with the name. So the name Stellantis comes from the Latin verb stello, which means to brighten with stars. Yeah, I know they really went kind of far with it, but the idea...
They went to a different galaxy.
Yeah.
Galaxy far away. Honestly, when I heard the word, I was thinking Atlantis. I was like, must have something to do with Atlantis, but I guess not.
Yeah, like I think basically the idea is that to brighten with the stars in this like example are all of their different car companies that they have. So like Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, Fiat, Maserati, all these different car companies that are associated under this name are what are brightening, I guess, this new company. So I think essentially what they're trying to make a statement and say is that, like, basically, like, look how much pull we have under our belt, through this new name. That they're saying, like, we're not either one, we're this mega company now, which is they're now the fourth largest auto company by volume.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And that's from, like, I mean, if you ask people that are at Ford or GM, they're like, man, Fiat. I mean, Chrysler is like, they're dead or whatever. Like, you have this negative perception, and then now this merger into Stellantis, it really takes them up to another level. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, because like if you look at like Ford and GM, they don't really do that amazingly overseas. And so FCA kind of has this mentality of like, okay, like maybe we're because in the U.S. FCA is number 3, right? It's GM, then Ford, then FCA. So they have this business model where they're like, all right, instead of trying to like fight for number 1 within the U.S., why don't we like boost our international sales by merging with another company? It's actually like a very smart move for them.
So I want to recap real quick, and then I want to ask you a couple other questions. So if I'm getting this correctly, you're saying couple main points here. So number 1 is the corporate hierarchy, making it clear that we're all under one banner. So internally is one reason why you would change your name. And number 2 is letting your internal suppliers, letting them know that, hey, we have now expanded capabilities and we're this new beast. Awesome. So you mentioned earlier in the episode that Chrysler has been through a couple different mergers, and usually they do it for the sake of saving money. I want to highlight one merger where I don't think it worked out the way they wanted it to. So when they merged with Daimler, I think what happened is they bought it for something like 30 billion, and then they ended up selling Chrysler after a couple of years for like 2 billion. Like they lost a lot of money. So it doesn't always go as we expected. But yeah, like $5.9 billion that they're saving. One thing that Ammar, maybe you can touch on a little bit is companies, brands, Ford, for example, Chrysler, they use like a frame of a car and then they build multiple different cars on it. Now, merging with a company overseas that has all these other brands and they're making these other cars already, what does that do for is that where you're seeing the cost savings? Like now you have a whole nother line of frames that you can kind of build your platforms to build cars on, or is where are we actually seeing, how are we seeing the cost savings is I guess what my question is.
Yeah, so I don't know too many of the details, but what I do know is that so now instead of FCA trying to establish a foothold in Europe, for example, and having to open up plants, having to do negotiations, having to really like kind of start from scratch, now it's not even like FCA is trying to come to Europe. It's literally like I'm already in Europe, like through this merger, like boom, we're there, and it's like if I want to open another plant, it's not even something that I have to give a second thought because we already have plants here. We're just going to open another one. It's it's simple as that. So I think a huge part of the savings is the fact that bringing like American cars like Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, Ram to overseas, across the pond is a lot more efficient now that they actually have like a real solid foothold in Europe.
How many? I don't know if you know the answer to this question. How many car brands were under PSA Group, like at the moment? I guess at the moment of the merger.
I think it was 8 from Chrysler and 6 from PSA, I believe. I know there are 14 total.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds like it would have made it. It sounds like it was a great financial decision. They have all the infrastructure overseas. They just bought. Paid an overhead cost to acquire, and then they expect the sales from all these cars to make up for that. Given that they have like all the infrastructure overseas already, sounds like a win-win situation for them. And it's so interesting because they even have like some pretty fancy cars under their belt. They have Alfa Romeos, they have Maseratis. So these are basically losing companies that aren't making money. And they're like, hey, I bet if we combine these together, make them our product, this is where we can turn us all around. And I thought it was so interesting that you also said that the PSA Group's CEO took over. Is that right? Is that what you said? and the Chrysler Automobiles FCA stepped down.
Yeah, I really wonder. Like, I wish I could be like a fly on the wall in that meeting.
In that meeting, yeah, yeah.
Like, how do you? I wonder who. Like, if the PSA guy told him like, "Hey, you have to step down," that's like an absolute power move. I wonder how that conversation
That's part of this. That's part of this acquisition. But one of the things that we learned from a case that we were looking at is that it really depends on who can make the better decisions for the company. The people that have better understandings of that or better awareness of that are the people that can make those decisions. And that ends up being a better move for the company because now whoever was the CEO of FCA, for example, they're probably, I don't know if they're fired, probably not, but they're probably doing something more specific in North America, whereas the PSA might be doing something more globally, stuff like that, where you relocate your resources to kind of make sure you're optimizing for the end result of the merger. So that's definitely something we've come across before. So we might have to look into that as well.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on real quick is on the Branding Deep Dive podcast, we haven't really talked about mergers or stuff like this in the past, and I think there's a lot to actually discuss now that we're actually discussing it. One thing that real quick wanted to just briefly mention is that companies are in different stages in the life cycle, and so companies like Amazon, for example, are in the growth stage. So generally, like, you're not going to be looking for cost savings when you're growing. You're going to be looking to just expand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, companies like Ford, GM, Fiat, Chrysler, or Stellantis now, these are mature companies that have been around for a while. And when you get to a point in your business where you are reaching critical masses, then it's time to start optimizing your processes and really start leaning out, right? And I think, like Ammar, you really hit the nail on the head with explaining that this is really just all about saving money, right? And so a lot of these decisions that we see, branding wise, whether it's right or wrong from our branding perspective, this is definitely the right move cost wise, right? Especially if they play their cards right? So definitely an interesting discussion. Ammar, I know you have a little bit of a background in being a youth director. I wanted to just get your thoughts on, as a youth director, you have to build a perception. Oftentimes you probably have to change the perception that youth have on certain concepts and ideas and things like that. So I want to just talk about when you're actually naming a program, for example, right? So you had like a youth program there on Saturdays, right? You guys had like a pretty sick, it was like a tree flyer, right? If I remember.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? Unity Center?
Yeah. So actually, if I can just dive into it a little bit.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that what you said about, like how important it is to brand yourself, especially in the youth director work, is that in youth director work, there's two really important things that you have to kind of keep in mind when it comes to branding. Number one is that you want to brand yourself as like youth-centric, but also without compromising on your values, right? Compromising on actual substance. And I think this is something that really can apply to any company, that when you're trying to brand yourself, you're trying to pull people in, but as you're pulling people in, you don't want to compromise on what makes you, and the second big thing is that youth in particular can snuff out like fakeness like so easily. So if you're trying too hard, if you are trying to like compromise and like trying to like, pull them in and trying to do what like some like boomer adult thinks youth will like, immediately they'll recognize, like not even with a hesitation, like immediately they'll recognize it. And immediately, like not only do you not pull them in, you're just like completely X'd out in their mind. Like your branding has failed so hard that like now they're no longer interested in anything you're putting out, and it's very hard to pull them back in. So
I'm wondering if this is coming from personal experience.
So I'm getting there.
I'm going. Oh, nice. All right.
Don't worry. So the thing is about youth director work is that you fail a lot, and there's a lot of learning experiences. So actually, that Saturday program that you mentioned with like the sick tree logo, we called it Rise, like Rise, like like above temptation, or Rise, like above like whatever it might be. It was kind of like a general name. It sounded cool. Flyer looks cool. Logo looks cool. Program failed within about 8 weeks.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and like there's a lot of factors to why it failed. I think I actually don't think branding, in terms of like the name and the logo, made that much of a difference. I think it was more about the fact that the target audience were not ready to receive it yet. So the target audience being young high school boys in young high school Muslim males, that base had not been developed yet to the point where they're like, you know what, I do want, to come to the mosque on a weekly basis and like play basketball and do these activities and listen to us talk and things like that. They were more already in the mentality of like, well, I can just play basketball on my own. I don't need to come to your program. And so actually, I think the issue is that the program, we try to brand it as like this, like, come play basketball program, this come have fun program, but really our target audience was already doing that. So they're like, wait, like, why do I care about your program? And then later, by the end of that year, which was 2016, we started another program, and a Saturday program as well. We called it Saturday Shabab. And Shabab is the Arabic word for like youth, specifically like young men. So we called it Saturday Shabab, which eventually the board made us change because they didn't like the name. They didn't like that it was in Arabic, and they're like, it might be associated with something overseas. Just call it Saturday Youth. And so they kind of strong-armed us. Yeah, like literally, I was like, I'm like, no, like, I'm sorry, I don't agree with changing this. And they're like, you're changing it. And like in the next email out, it was just changed. I'm like, all right, I guess we're changing it. But I understood their point. Like, I understood their concern. But that program focused more on like bonds of brotherhood, on personal growth, on, spending time at the mosque, which was really the purpose of the program. But initially, like, we tried to brand our first program as like this fun whatever program. But in the reality, obviously, like, me as youth director, my concern is not, getting kids to play basketball. In my mind, okay, that's a means to an end, which is like bettering these young men, right? But the problem is the way we tried to market it was this like fun activity when they're like, we can already have fun on our own. We don't need you to have fun, especially like the community I was in is a very affluent community. And so a lot of the youth already have a lot of these things accessible to them. They, many of them have cars, many of them have like money to spend. So there's not really much different that you're providing them. Whereas when you provide them substance, when you provide them things that they don't really already have access to, then it's like, okay, like now I want part of that brotherhood. I want part of that growth,
It sounds like you started with like a cookie cutter template, but then you went deeper and analyzed your target audience, and you realized, hey, this is the solution we can be providing, and rebrand it accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people in general, people want substance. People like substance. People don't want to feel like they're being marketed to, right? Like anytime you feel like, this, like if I see like an ad on YouTube, I immediately get upset.
Yeah. Sometimes on Snapchat, like the advertisements that I can't like click through, I won't watch. But then the ones that I can click through, I'll watch just because they didn't pay extra to keep my attention.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. Definitely, you don't want to be marketed to.
You show them, Abdul Mannan. Yeah. You show them.
Even though I've never bought. I did my part, all right?
Yeah, I think one thing that I wanted to just touch on is that what Ammar is really hinting at is that when you're starting something new, you need to have something that's different. You need to have a differentiator. And so you need to, and understanding what your differentiator can be or will be has to start with understanding who your target audience is. Right. And so once you found out that, hey, these guys already have all this stuff, then he's like, okay, they don't need this. This is what they need. Right. So again, we talk about creativity and really what innovation comes from. Again, I think the point here is that really just understanding what the problem is at a deep level, just diving deep until you really understand what's missing and then building from there. So Ammar, any other thoughts you have that you want to share with the audience? Any tips, any advice?
My advice would be like one very practical tip is to survey. That's something I did a little bit when I first became youth director, but like in hindsight, I wish I did way more. That surveying is something that is very, very important, particularly surveying your target audience, whether it's for your small business, whether it's for, your nonprofit, your youth programs. It's so important to try and get like a really good, a population of your target audience and get their feedback. And sometimes you can be kind of surrounded by people who will tell you like, this is great or that's great. And you can kind of be getting advice from them, but really you're only going to know, or you're only going to have a stronger idea of what people need when you actually go and ask the people themselves.
Really powerful. Thank you so much, Ammar, for making the time to come on and share your thoughts Yeah, sharing. We hope to have you again soon. I think I want to really dive into the youth director, your time as a youth director, and kind of some of the lessons you learned from there. So if we can get you on, soon to discuss that, I think that'd be really beneficial. But again, thank you again for coming on. For the audience that's listening, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.